Hey Wargamers, over the weekend, Pro Tabletop Gaming held a tournament in Atlanta with a $10,000 prize pool, which by itself is pretty darn cool, but something else pretty cool happened that weekend too, and that is that to at least some people's surprise, Tau walked away undefeated with top honors. Now, that of course is Richard Siegler, who is making quite a name for himself with his Tau army, doing well in Nova Open as well, and just really solidifying Tau as a top-tier army in the right hands. So today I want to take a look at his army list. It's familiar in some ways, but also some pretty unique choices, or at least unconventional choices that I want to break down and kind of talk about why I think they were in that list without actually playing any of the games. So, that's what we're going to do today. Before I do that, though, I want to say thanks for watching, of course, and also thanks to Nick Nanavati. Apparently in the last game, he was the, always present gentleman and made sure that he pointed out an opportunity to use a fusion blaster to its full extent when he could have not said anything and the game might have turned out a little bit differently. So always great to see sportsmanship, especially with such high stakes, this being a $10,000 tournament. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nick Nanavati, for being a great sportsman. So let's jump into the list and break it down. All right, so let's start off with a basic overview, and then we'll go through and pick out some points that I think are worth talking about. To no one's surprise, this is a Tau Sept army with 3 detachments, a battalion, a Vanguard, and an Outrider detachment. The battalion detachment starts off with an Enforcer battlesuit, advanced targeting system, 3 cyclic ion blasters, 2 shield drones, an ethereal Honor Blade, hover drone, again, 2 shield drones. For troops, we have 3 breacher teams, and we're going to come back to this, with a Guardian drone and a Shazui with a marker light, at least in 2 of them. They also have shield drones in those units. For the Outrider detachment, we have a commander in a Cold Star, this time with 3 fusion blasters, because of course, Cold Stars can't take cyclic ion blasters, a drone controller and 2 shield drones. We have a unit of Pathfinders with a Pulse Accelerator drone, a Grav Inhibitor drone, a Recon drone, and 2 shield drones. So a nice little packet of drones there. And then 5 Pathfinders. Yeah, just Pathfinders, right? For tactical drones, we have 3 units, of course, and these are packed full with drones. We have 8 shield drones in each and 4 marker drones in each. Then for the Vanguard detachment, we have a commander and enforcer with advanced targeting system and 3 cyclic ion blasters, and then 3 Riptides, all kitted out as you might expect with heavy burst cannon and smart missile system. They also have a advanced targeting system and a velocity tracker on them. So not going with the target lock, going with the velocity tracker instead. And again, we'll talk about that. So in all, this is 2,000 points, and it did well, right? It went undefeated at this massive tournament. So let's break down some of these specific choices and talk about why I think they really belong in this list. As far as HQ units go, I don't think there's a lot to say about the Enforcer suits. Yes, they're good. They have cyclic ion blasters, which is a fantastic weapon, a wide amount of versatility and utility in that weapon choice. Taking it alongside of an advanced targeting system allows you greater utility against certain types of targets, particularly heavily armored targets, which is something that the cyclic ion blaster does well with, but it, having that -2 as opposed to -1 helps inch the cyclic ion blaster closer to being a jack of all trades, whereas currently it has a trade-off with fusion blasters in that cyclic ion blasters are better against things with invulnerable saves, and fusion blasters are better against things without them. So by taking that advanced targeting system, you help kind of compensate for that disparity and allow the cyclic ion blaster to be, a pretty, amazing weapon, right? I mean, that's why it's in this list. It's just a great weapon. So yes, that makes a lot of sense. Take shield drones with them. Great. Let's move on. The Ethereal has a hover drone, which is important because he needs to be able to keep up with all the drones. He is there largely to keep drones on the table and keep them from failing their morale checks. So having that there is really important. Having him have that mobility is critical for his role. And then he can also, dish out feel no pains and stuff, which is good just in general, right? So having him have that hover drone is important. He also has 2 shield drones because it's another way for the army to put shield drones into the list. Now, importantly, there aren't any Fireblades in this list, and I think that makes perfect sense considering that we have breachers and not strike teams, and then there's really just not a lot of utility for a Cadre Fireblade in this list as it is constructed. You're just not getting the utility, and there's tons of marker lights in this list, so you don't really need that 2-up marker light on its own. So we have ethereals and commanders, and that's the whole HQ choice. For the Cold Star commander, though, I think there's some notable points here. One is that he has a drone controller, which of course you really need if you're taking this number of marker light drones. Having that drone controller is really important. But it actually works out really nicely with the Cold Star chassis, right? One option would be to just take a drone controller with Fusion Blasters on Enforcer or Cyclic Ion on Enforcer, but no, we go with a Cold Star instead. And that gives us, kind of two main paths forward. One is that in turn 1, turn 2, you don't really need to utilize the Cold Star's maneuverability. The Cold Star has that fantastic 40-inch movement if he advances, and that is something that can easily get you into massive trouble early on in the game. So instead, the Cold Star needs to kind of hang out with his buddies, which just so happen to be a bunch of marker drones. So you're utilizing that basically that strategy to its fullest by giving him and not someone else the drone controller. He's not going to have the same ability to dish out damage turn 1, turn 2 as he might if he flew off, and so it's not a huge loss if you replace one of those weapons, one of those fusion blasters, with a drone controller instead. So giving him that drone controller not only is a lower cost point for the model, but it also allows those marker drones critically to have an improved ballistic skill. So overall, really, important for the drones, but also leverages the fact that the Cold Star is going to be hanging out with them, at least for the first couple turns. On top of that, it makes a lot of sense because that maneuverability is going to be useful in turns 4 and 5. When the board is sparser and he needs to, get behind a building to take out the last couple wounds on a target or, capture an objective, something like that. He's going to make some darting movement potentially. And so at that point, your marker drones are probably going to be gone. So having the drone controller around non-existent drones is not a priority. So by having the Cold Star, have this, you're not giving up anything later in the game either. It's just a really elegant solution for different priorities in turns 1 and turn 2 versus turns 4 and 5. Having the drone controller on the Cold Star is just a really elegant solution. The only troop choices in this list are those 3 breacher teams, and again, we have marker lights on 2 of the Shazwi, a good way to have a more reliable marker light source, and something that's embedded with a fair amount of padding, right? Having the marker light on the Shazwi, even though it's a breacher team, means that marker light's going to be on the board a reasonable amount of time. You have to kill everything else before you get to that one marker light. So having that in there makes sense, of course. Additionally, we have shield drones on these units, and Richard made a really good, obviously a good choice, but a cost-effective choice, I think, in that he has 2 shield drones on 1 breacher team, and then the other 2 breacher teams only have 1 shield drone. Now, if he had the points, I'm sure those would all be 2 shield drones, but he doesn't. So instead of putting 2, 2, and 0, he takes 2, 1, and 1, which is important because it means that your shield drones have to be targeted independently. You have the same saving power with them, but they have to be targeted separately if someone wants to shoot them down. That slows down your opponent, it slows down you a little bit in terms of movement, but it gives you more flexibility and, importantly, kind of mitigates some of the shooting potential of your opponent. So spreading them out like that is actually pretty useful, and especially in the ITC format, where one of the missions is, or one of your objectives is just kill more, right? It doesn't matter how many more you kill, really. So whether or not you give up, 1 kill point or 2 kill points because you have, 2 drones split across 1 or 2 units is relatively inconsequential. So this is, again, a strength of spreading drones out given the context of the missions, given the way that ITC is spread out. If you are going to be giving up 2 more kill points, you might as well give up 10 more kill points. So having that number of drones spread across a large number of units is relatively, a better gain than it is a loss. Then, of course, there's the issue of these being breachers and not strike teams. Something that clearly stood out to me when I saw this list was that we have breachers which have a very different role than strike teams. And in the past, I generally think that strike teams would be more suited to the types of roles that we see for infantry in this Triptide list, right? The main idea is that these infantry are meant to be objective holders and also, to some extent, bubble wrap and some sort of aerial denial unit, right? They're there to do some relatively, they're not there for their damage output, basically. So taking strike teams gives you a way to do all those things, but still pepper the opponent with shots from a distance. But if you're really going to be dealing with a army that's going to be close by anyway because of objectives and because they're going to try to be taking out your drones and your riptides, of course, then having breachers makes a lot of sense. And given the prevalence of Space Marines with bolters, having breachers nearby actually works out pretty well. And critically, their weapon profile is fantastic at dealing with Marines. So having breachers instead of strike teams makes a big difference when you're dealing with those particular unit types at close range. So I think it actually makes a lot of sense, and I think it works out well. Obviously, it did for Richard in this case to have breachers as your kind of support infantry units. They're not there to take out an entire army. They're not going on long voyages to take out like a Devastator team or something in the back. Instead, they are there to take out a few units, few individuals that make it up to your front lines and, do some choice removals of particularly problematic infantrymen. So I really like that choice as well. I don't have a lot to say about the fast attack options here. We see Pathfinders return in this version of the list. They are there to be a marker light source, but they also have 2 other strengths. One is that they bring this 5-man unit of drones. You have the recon drone, you have the pulse accelerator, and the grav inhibitor drone, and then you have 2 shield drones on top of it, which by itself actually has 6 wounds because the recon drone is beefier than other drones. Plus, you have a fair amount of utility built into that little package, and you can select in which order you wish to lose those features when that particular unit goes away. So you might choose to lose the recon drone first, therefore deferring the loss of shield drones or those other utility drones till later on. Or you might say, I don't need the grav inhibitor drone. I'm going to get rid of that. So you can pick and choose your way through this. It's a choose your own adventure story built into a unit of drones, which is very flexible and has a lot of utility to it. Additionally, the Pathfinders can scout up and make things again slower for an advancing opponent. So you have some area denial options there as well. For the tactical drones, you have a bulk of shield drones, which obviously, right, they're good. I don't have to sell anyone on shield drones. Marker drones, on the other hand, probably need a little bit of explanation. Now, the strategy for marker lights in this list is just to have enough marker lights to really boost up your riptide shooting. And so you don't need to make all these shots, right? You don't need to have just a few high quality shots. You can spread up, you can have kind of a shotgun approach to marker lights where it's quantity over quality. And that's kind of what this list does, although not really once you have the drone controller in amongst all of these marker drones. So you have a high quantity of, okay marker drones. Not fantastic, right? It's not a 2-up, but it's pretty decent. Plus you have the benefit of them being drones and having the ability to perform savior protocols. So we're really making our marker lights in this list harder to root out if you're the opponent, and more reliable overall and flexible for Richard or for whoever the commander is, right? So by having our marker drones spread out like this, we're or marker lights spread out like this across marker drones, pathfinders, and Shazui, we have a ton of marker lights, and it's really hard for the opponent to take care of all of them in a time scale that actually will make a difference for how the battle goes. So they have to make a choice, and oftentimes they're not going to be able to fully remove the marker lights to the point where you don't actually have enough marker lights to, have your Riptides focus down a unit or several. So I think that's the strength here. And then, of course, we get to the Riptides, and I'm not going to try to sell you on Riptides, just like I'm not going to bother trying to sell you on shield drones. Everybody knows Riptides are fantastic. But the question that pops up is why Velocity Tracker and not Target Lock? I've historically been more on the Target Lock side of things, but certainly it's worked out well for Richard here. And so I think the reason is looking at kind of what you're actually doing with the Riptides instead of just thinking about it on paper. One is that if Riptides are standing still or moving, very little, then it doesn't really matter if you have a target lock, right? That's a wasted opportunity. So instead, taking the Velocity Tracker against the high number of units with fly is much more advantageous. And there are tons of units that have fly, and particularly problematic ones that have fly as well. So by taking the Velocity Tracker, you are setting yourself up for an option where you can say, okay, if there's an army that has a lot of fly or some particular units that I need to take care of that have fly, I can make the choice to stand still and still shoot my Velocity Tracker. Or given the high number of marker lights in this list, totally ignore that issue altogether. So taking the Velocity Tracker, especially with this number of marker lights in the list, is actually a much better choice. It allows you greater ability to select your tactics based on your opponent, as opposed to taking a target lock, which here would often be redundant with the number of marker lights in the list. If you're taking a list that doesn't have a lot of marker lights, taking the target lock makes sense. If you have sufficient marker lights to override the penalty for moving and shooting, then why not take a Velocity Tracker? It's making you all that much better. So that's the idea with the Velocity Tracker there instead of the target lock. It just works with this number of marker lights and with the flyer heavy meta. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Of course, congratulations to Richard for another awesome performance. And as always, thanks for watching and happy wargaming. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I really mean it when I say this channel is made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining our community over there as well. Special thanks to Shifty, Dallas Ellis, Jim Bob, Scott Heater, Nick Steele, Jared Egler, Tao Oswald, Jackson, Stephen Cohen, Eric Jackson, Zealous Brimstone, Evan Wells, and Chris Kessler.